Good afternoon and welcome everyone to a very exciting beginning here at Pilzno Work Inspired, the opportunity to be able to explore the wonderful Chag of Pesach 𝗂𝗪𝗓 from a PWI style, right? Which here in the Beis Medrash of Pilzno, the Beis Medrash of Reb 𝗀𝗧, to be able to see and understand in depth the connection between Parnassa and the different Chagim and different stages that we go throughout the year. Just before we begin, we'd just like to dedicate this shir is being given 𝗟𝗟𝗧, a very special Yid, Reb Sholom Mark, Reb Sholom ben Mernachem Mendel, right, who was a very special Yid who survived the Holocaust and was 𝗀𝗘𝗘𝗏 to Eretz Yisrael, and to be able to build a mishpacha and 𝗀𝗘𝗧 and all of the learning and the inspiration and transformation that will be done from this year should be a 𝗟𝗟𝗧, his 𝗀𝗘𝗧, as on the 25th of Adar. Welcome everyone, our on-site B'nai Chabur here at the Beis Simcha Cafe. There you go. For those of you who are not able to make it in person, joining us on live stream to be able to at least see the coffee. It's worth coming to Ramat Beit Shemesh just for the coffee. And for all of our listeners around the world, to our Anytime and other platforms who are joining together with us as we go through this journey, it's very special. It's very special to be able to share the light of the Pilzno Beis Medrash. Reb 𝗀𝗧, of course, many of you know, right? Talmidim of Reb 𗗀𝗧, who will be joining us throughout the series, is not going to be here together. If you haven't yet noticed, he's not sitting next to me for this intro shir. But really, the or of Pilzno and the Beis Medrash, with tremendous 𝗪𝗧, right, to the Beis Medrash and to the Kollel and the program that's been taking place here over the past year, and very exciting what will be starting after Pesach within the global Chabur, really what you're going to be able to get a taste of as we go through this Pesach series, the opportunity not just to hear some nice ideas in a Parsha Torah, right, or a fascinating discussion in a podcast, but really the opportunity to be able to see what's been taking place here in the Beis Medrash, to be able to go through a topic in Torah through Chazal, through the sources, avodas, to be able to take with us, to be able to implement into our lives. B'ezus Hashem, this is what we're going to be doing after Pesach in the global Chabur, as we're going to be exploring in depth topics of work, topics of money, topics of wealth, topics of finance. It's very exciting, B'ezus Hashem, and each one of you who are going to be tasting with us today should enjoy the tam and invited to be able to join us with us as we journey together after Chag. So it's interesting, this topic, Pesach and Parnassa. I was having a conversation about this with someone, and I would say that when we're thinking about Pesach, perhaps you might even think to take Pesach and to limit it to the topic of Parnassa is perhaps a bit imprisoning, right? As we know, as Yidden, Pesach is something, right? It's our oxygen, right? Pesach it gives us 𝗪𝗧. It's our birthday, right? It's everything. Pesach is everything. And the truth is that it would be imprisoning. And even here in Pilzno Work Inspired, I'm going to say, to think that Pesach is just about Parnassa is imprisoning. That is not the intention, right, of this year. However, at the same time, what we want to do here together is to understand that for so many people, when they hear, both of them start with the same letter, when they hear the pay of Pesach and the pay of Parnassa, the only thing that they can think of what they have to do together is the fact that Pesach costs a lot of money. It does. It does, right? Pesach and Parnassa. I need 𝗀𝗘𝗧'𝗦, okay. I have to give. I have to be able to pay for everything. Already the conversations as we roll into Chodesh Nisan, what, the kids get out of school. Why did they get out of school so early? Are there pre-Pesach camps? How are we going to make everything work? And it's a bit of a chaval, it's a bit of a shame, right? Because the truth is that there's so much of a deeper connection, right, between Pesach and Parnassa, and that's what we're going to be doing here as we explore and excavate this topic together, right? To be able to see how Pesach and Parnassa and the themes of Parnassa and work are something which is embedded throughout the Chag, so that therefore each one of us, as we go through the Chag, and I would say even not just as we go through the Chag, as we prepare for the Chag, right? If you're the type of person who's going to be finding themselves preparing for Pesach, not just when you're cleaning in your house, right? But you're going to be in the office, you're going to be behind your desk, you're going to be behind, whatever you're doing for work. And you might be thinking, okay, how is this anything to do with Pesach? Right? Besides the fact that I need to have money so I can pay for my matzahs and pay for the afikomen presents and so on and so forth, and the vacations and going away, I understand, but what does my work, what does my involvement in Parnassa have anything to do with Pesach? Right? It's my hope, it's our hope, and our 𝗧his, B'ezras Hashem, we're going to get there, that throughout this series that we're going to understand that there's so much depth to it. And what we're going to be doing, just to give a quick outline of this series, is that as we transition from Purim, right, into Pesach, right, we're going to explore what does it mean, 𝗀𝗪𝗧 𝗦𝗨𝗕, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, how to understand the hachana process of Pesach and how that connects to Parnassa, right, traveling into Shabbos HaGadol, right, traveling into Pesach, looking at Leil HaSeder, or the fundamental mitzvahs of matzah and maror, right, and the arba kosos, steeper Yetzias Mitzrayim, right, 𝗧hIs Pesach, right, to be able to give us a way as we go through from Hachana, through all the way from the beginning of Pesach to the end of Pesach, to be able to give us the way so that we're able to connect in a deep way, to be able to understand what's taking place, and as we always do here, right, in the Chabura, to be able to walk away with practical tools, right, in avodas, so that we're able to tap into the 𝗀𝗪𝗧 of Pesach that are there, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to connect in many aspects of our avodas Hashem, but also in the area of our Parnassa. All right, so the truth is, how do we start talking? I just mentioned it a few seconds ago, right? If we're going to talk about Pesach, we can't talk about Pesach before talking about Purim, right? Because we know that from the Gemara speaks about this deep connection, right, that exists between Purim and Pesach. The Gemara in Megillah, right, Daf Vav Amud Beis, is being darish a pasuk that we know from Esther. We just read it. The Kayim Aleim Liois Oisim es Yom 14 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Adar ves Yom 15 boy, right, that we should be Mekayim, right, the 14th and the 15th of Adar, v'chol shana v'shana, in every year. And the Gemara in Megillah, Daf Vav Amud Beis, is discussing, right, what happens, what do we do in a situation, right, where we have a leap year and there are two Adars in terms of when do we celebrate Purim. And we find, right, there's a machlokes, right, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi, right, so we see over here that v'chol shana v'shana, ma'kol shana v'shana, right, so we see over here Adar Samach L'Shvat, Af Kan Adar Samach L'Shvat. So we have one shita that when we're saying it should be v'chol shana v'shana, that it should be in every year, right? So every year, literally the Megillah is talking about every year. What the drush over here is just like it's in every year, we find that Adar is connected to Shvat. So too, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yossi are saying that we should celebrate Purim connected to Shvat, which would mean that we would celebrate Purim in the first Adar in a leap year. Then we have the Shita of Shimon Gamliel Sabar, v'chol shana v'shana ma'kol shana v'shana Adar Samach L'Nisan, that in every year we find that Adar is connected to Nisan. Afghan Adar Samach L'Nisan. So too, we should have Adar connected to Nisan, and therefore we should celebrate Purim when? And this is the way that we pasuk in the halacha, where we should celebrate Purim in the second Adar. So the Gemara continues, Bishlam Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi, Mistaber, Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi says, right, says it's Mistaber time of the immeasurably ala mitzvahs, because of the fact, right, that we have a klal when it comes to the Torah that we shouldn't be mavir and mitzvahs, and therefore if we have an opportunity, right, to do something sooner, to do it afterwards, right, we see that we don't want to pass over a mitzvah, and therefore we shouldn't do it first. Rabbi Sholom Gamliel, my time. So what's the reason Rabbi Sholom Gamliel holds of his opinion? So I'm Rabbi Tabi, time of Rabbi Sholom Gamliel, because Mesamech Geula the Geula Adif. Because even though we have this principle of Imavir and Ala Mitzvahs, we have another concept here, right, which is brought down, and we hold this way, is that we want to connect the Geula of Purim to the Geula of Pesach. Right, Mesamech Geula the Geula Adif. And much has been written about this. It's written about the halacha, it's written about, right, in the Svarim Mekdoshim, Svarim Pnimiyim, about what's really the deep connection, right, between Purim and Pesach. The fact that we have to have this connection on the calendar year. And what they're explaining is that there's a process which is unfolding, right? And it's a deep Torah, right? There's many aspects of it, but just to speak about one angle that we spoke about within our Purim shir, it's not too late. I believe it's still It's on YouTube. It's still on the channels. People can get access to it. And if you haven't yet seen it, it's never too late to connect to Purim, especially because we're speaking over here about a hachana for what we're doing over here. So we have over here a very insightful Torah from the 𝗧his Emes. He's speaking of Parsha Zachar Taf Reish Mem. And the 𝗧his Emes says, "V'yemei Pesach mis'oyer shorish ha'geula b'yoser," that we know that the Zman of Geula, right, in its highest form, right, what's the root of all Geula comes from Pesach. V'Amalek yada v'heven ki v'yetzias Mitzrayim nitzchasku b'nei Yisrael l'doros olam. And Amalek, right, that Koach of Amalek was able to sense this, that through Yetzias Mitzrayim b'nei Yisrael were becoming strong. And therefore, the Chemiyava Amalek levatel v'lahachlish koach Yetzias Mitzrayim la'arei beistanu. And therefore, because of that, because of the tremendous potential, so Amalek came, and Amalek went to be mevatel and to weaken that koach that we have. Shelo lios achuzim b'shorish hanisim, so that we're not going to be fully connected, not fully holding in the root of nisim. So says the 𝗧his Emes, l'chein kodim yemei Pesach hiktimu chazal parsha Zachar. So therefore we find that that before we come to Pesach, we have this mitzvah of parsha Zachar. The 𝗧his Emes goes on to explain as well the 𝗀𝗚𝗧 of how Purim, right, came at that time. And what the 𝗧his Emes is saying is something very profound. It says that we know that when it comes to this mitzvah of Zechiras Amalek, we say that we should remember that which Amalek did to us, right? B'tzeischem Mitzrayim, where we were b'derech b'tzeischem Mitzrayim, when we were coming out of Mitzrayim, where we had this tremendous experience of Geula, and through that, right, we were mischazek, right, to be able to reach our potential. Amalek came dafka to be able to break that and to be able to weaken that. So too, what we do each year is b'derech the Pesach. Right, to understand that as we're moving towards Pesach, right, and the Sa'ara of Pesach and the Sa'ara of Geula that each one of us to be able to tap into when Pesach comes around, in order for us to be able to fully experience Pesach, first we have the mitzvah of Zachar, first we have the mitzvah of Mechias Amalek, first we have a Purim. So therefore we see that Purim itself is part of the Hachana of Pesach. How this ties into the realm, right, of finances, and how it ties into the realm of money and Parnassa. So as we explained in our Purim shir, right, that one aspect of removing the klipa of Amalek was for us through our Purim to be able to absorb an abundance mindset, right, to be able to have a healthy relationship with Shefa, right, and to be able to block those things and the klipa of Amalek which is blocking Shefa. Right, and the concept that we're going to be rolling with over here is that as we've gone through that experience through Purim, and we've been able to connect ourselves more to this abundance mindset, that sets up the stage for us, so that therefore as we roll into Pesach, right, and all of the bracha connected to Parnassa that's there for us on Pesach, we're going to be able to connect with it. So where do we find, which is to now jump into this topic, right, that some of you might be thinking about, okay, it's very, very nice, but where do we find this connection between Pesach and Parnassa? So really it's found in the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. Right, the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah says, right, Mishnah, Ba'arba Prakim Ba'olam Nidon, that we find that there are 4 times in the year, right, that the world is judged. Right, but Pesach ala Tvua, that when it comes to Pesach, there's a type of a judgment which is done on the grain. Batzeres ala peros, when it comes to 𝗀𝗏is, connected to the peros, to the peros ha'ilan, to the fruits of the trees. Rosh Hashanah kol be'olim oivin lifnei kamei maran. Right, so that we're familiar with. Right, that's the one most people relate to. Rosh Hashanah. We're speaking over there about our Rosh Hashanah in terms of people being judged. And then the Chag nidon alamayim, referencing to 𝗀𝗚liche, right, being judged on water. So the question over here is, what does this mean that Pesach nidon ala tvua? So there's a Torah from the Bnei Yissaschar, right, in Mamari Chodesh Nisan, where he explains and really reveals for us a bit of the dynamic. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, to understand the dynamic of that's being expressed there in the Mishnah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu judging the world on Tvua Dafka on Pesach. So the Bnei Yissaschar says, Poiskin miloimer geshem b'chag Pesach. We find right, that we know when it comes to davening for rain, we start davening for rain on Sukkot, and we stop davening for rain on Pesach. So, the tzaddik says that 𝗀 Geshem hu Parnassa, because we know Geshem, right, he quotes the Gemara in 𝗀𝗧, right, that speaks about and highlights this, right, the connection, right, between Geshem, rain, right, and representing Parnassa in the world. And he says, 𝗀 achilas matzah lechem 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗏 hu skula leParnassa, that when we eat matzah on Pesach, that itself is a skula for Parnassa. Ki me'achilas mitzvah zu nimshach Parnassa, me'achilas matzah zu, mitzvah zu, both are mitzvah and matzah, right? Nimshach Parnassa l'chol hashana. That through eating matzah on Pesach, that enables us to be able to draw Parnassa into our lives for the whole year. The whole year. This is what the 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗏 is talking about. And therefore, we find that on Pesach is the time that 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu, right, is judging us, right, and is having a judgment on the tefua. And he brings a remez, Valkein, we find by gematria that the gematria of matzah lechem 𝗦𝗨𝗕 is the gematria of Geshem. Right, the 343. That if you do the gematria of matzah v'lechem 𝗦𝗨𝗕, you're going to find that it's the same gematria, which is being meramez, that on a spiritual level there's a pnimi connection between eating matzah and gashmias, right, and drawing in shefa. I think when you read this Torah and you think about what he's saying something very profound. And this is something that we're going to build out here today. Is that the zman itself of Pesach is a zman of Parnassa, and through the achila of matzah, we're going to speak a little bit to suggest why a little bit later, we find that it's the Parnassa is being nimshach, right? That the abundance, right, our Parnassa is being drawn for the whole year through this mitzvah of achilas matzah. So he says, Al kain bePesach nidoinen al tefua, and therefore we find that on Pesach Hashem, right, is bringing a judgment on tefua. And what we'd like to suggest here is that what this 𝗬𝗪 is highlighting regarding the relationship is that it's not just that Hashem on Pesach judges the tefua, but what 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu is sharing is that when Hashem decides to judge the tefua is in a time that is roi for shefa and parnassa. And because of the fact, what he's saying, me'achilas matzah nimshach parnassa v'chol hashana, because of that, we find that through this, it's drawing down parnassa. This is a time that Hashem says, this is going to be a time that we're going to bring a judgment on the tefua. This idea as well, it's true that it's really hinted to the 𝗧his 𝗦. We're going to see the 𝗧his 𝗦 inside in a second. But the 𝗧his 𝗦, before we get there, right, highlights the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that really speaks about this dynamic. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah in Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, right, brings down Tanya Rabbi Yehuda v'Shem Rabbi Akiva. B'pnei ma amru Torah heviu omer bePesach. Why is it that we find that also on Pesach, right, we have the carbon omer, right? That for us nowadays, right, because we're not able to bring the carbon omer, for us that just means, on the second day of Pesach, really have to realize there's another mitzvah. We have 𝗧his Omer coming into place, but really there's a lot of depth to the mitzvah of omer. We'll see if we have the time to discuss it more within the series. But the Gemara here says, "B'pnei Pesach zman tefua," because Pesach is a zman of tefua. The Pesach zman tefuahu. Right? Amar 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu. So 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu says, now dafka at this time heviu lefanai omer bePesach kedei shetisbarich lechem tefuas 𝗀𝗪𝗧. That I want you now dafka at this time to bring the carbon omer. Why? So that therefore I'll be able to give you a bracha. Meaning that 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu is saying, I want to bring bracha. Right? Nidoinen al tefuas, I want to bring bracha, and therefore I'm asking, the way that things will be set up is in a way that Hashem says, bring the omer, so that therefore I'll be able to channel in this bracha. And this is what the 𝗧his 𝗦 says in Pesach Taf Reish Mem Zayin, where he explains, where he says, Isa b'mishnah b'Pesach al tefua, right, that we just quoted a few seconds ago. What does it mean that on Pesach 𝗀𝗪𝗧 Baruch Hu is bringing this judgment al tefua? Right, Hashem says, bring me the omer, so that therefore I'll be able to channel bracha into the field. So the 𝗧his 𝗦 says beautifully, he says, Inyan hu, ki b'nei Yisrael k'sheyatzu miMitzrayim. because on Pesach, Bnei Yisrael went out of Mitzrayim, Nasu kelim lekabel habracha haba mishamayim b'shoresh hashefa. That Bnei Yisrael, we became the vehicle, we became the vessel, in that we'll be able to in that which we'll be able to receive the bracha, to be able to receive the blessing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'shoresh hashefa. What does it mean b'shoresh hashefa? That we'll be able to receive, right, the bracha that Hashem is sending down from its root. So 𝗧his is going to explain beautifully. L'chein nesar ha-𝗀𝗧𝗦 b'Pesach. We find this halacha we're all familiar with, right? We can't eat chametz on Pesach. What's the idea over here that we can't eat chametz on Pesach? So he says, "Shebnei Yisrael mekablin hashefa koydem shenishtana v'mischametz v'mispashe dekam anafim v'azner kachametz." Because what is one way of looking at what chametz is? Chametz is a manifestation of a bracha that takes place after that bracha that came from Shoresh was already mispashed, it already expanded, it already developed into something else. It was already nishtana, it was already mischametz, it was already mispashed, right? It already changed, right? We know we have the dough, right? And then through the process of something become chametz, it changes into something else. So therefore what the 𝗧his is saying is so beautiful, is that he's saying, we'll just read a couple more lines and then we'll sum this up. He says, 𝗬𝗪 𝗀𝗪 that when we talk about the difference between chametz and matzah, and we're going to speak about this, really this is not a share in chametz and matzah, we're going to have a dedicated share in chametz, a dedicated share in matzah, but just everything is intertwined. So just understand what the 𝗧his is saying over here, connected to what the Parnassa on Pesach is that he's saying, is that matzah manifests the reality of receiving something 𝗀𝗪cy, just as it is. Right? It is what you get. It is what's there. You have the dough, you put it in the oven, that's what it is. And that's manifesting bracha that's coming from shoresh. What's chametz? Chametz is manifesting, receiving bracha that already changed. It already went through a process. It's not receiving bracha from its state of shoresh. So says the 𝗧his, what's one understanding of why Bnei Yisrael we're not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach? Hear what he's saying? He's saying we can't eat chametz on Pesach, but because the zman of Pesach, because of the or of Pesach, is a time in which Hashem wants us to receive the shefa and the abundance b'shoresh. He wants us to receive it from its root source. He doesn't want us to receive it after it was mishtalshel and it was already changed. So Hashem says, "Asur to eat chametz on Pesach, chevra." On Matzah is a time where Pesach is a time where we want to be able to align ourselves, and we have the ability to, because of the fact we went into Mitzrayim, so that we became the vehicle, the kelim, that we can receive bracha b'shefa. So Hashem says, for these 7 days, where there's this tremendous awe of receiving bracha from a place of its shoresh, from its root, therefore eat matzah, so that therefore you're able to align yourself in that way. And that's what he goes on to say. He says, we find as well, 𝗀𝗽liche 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗏, that when it came to the karbanos, 𝗧h𝗛𝗏, so he says that we find, right, when it comes to karbanos, we're directed what type of lechem was eaten with it. Was it matzah? Right? Was it lechem? So he says that we find this being paralleled as well over here. Right? It's manifesting a spiritual reality. Right, of that which is taking place. So he says, 𝗀𝗪 Bnei Yisrael b'Pesach b'kedusha. That when it comes to the 𝗀𝗪 of Bnei Yisrael on Pesach, it's done in a way of kedusha, very similar to karbanos. And then he says, 𝗀𝗪 sidra HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyos din 𝗪h'tvuah b'Pesach. And this is the key line. This is what we were talking about a few seconds ago. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was misader. That when will the din of 𝗪h'tvuah be? When will the din of 𝗪h'tvuah be? Dafka b'Pesach. Because of the fact that the or of Pesach and through Yetzias Mitzrayim we're able to receive bracha b'shoresh of that shefa, of that abundance. Hashem says, now's the time I'm going to give the din of 𝗪h'tvuah. So that therefore, as we saw from the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, 𝗪𝗪 lechem 𝗪h'tvuah shebesadah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I can give more. So that therefore, the 𝗪h'tvuah of this year is going to be blessed because it's coming through Pesach. So beautiful. If Rabbi 𝗀𝗧'𝗦 is here, it'd say, tzvi, stop, and just receive what the 𝗧his is sharing. Beautiful. Pesach nikre Shabbos 𝗀𝗘𝗧 b'Shabbos Kodesh. We find that Pesach is called Shabbos, just like Shabbos Kodesh. Of course, 𝗧his, everything's about Shabbos. So just like Shabbos Kodesh, shemisbarchim minei kula yomin umana lo yarad bei. So the Zohar Kadosh, we've spoken about this in the base medrash, where the Zohar Kadosh says that Shabbos is a day that brings bracha to the rest of the week, even though on Shabbos itself the man didn't fall. So he said, "The shoresh habracha kodim shemisgashtem." Right? That what is Shabbos? Shabbos is the shoresh habracha. It's the shoresh habracha before it's brought out into anything which is physical. And therefore he says, "K'mo kein b'Pesach habracha yoredes al kol yimei hashana b'shoresh." 𝗧his says, the connection between Pesach and Parnassa. Pesach, the bracha comes down on the whole year, right? Similar to what we saw from the Bnei Yissaschar. It comes down the whole year b'shoresh. V'zeh shoresh einam yichoylin lekabel rak Bnei Yisrael. And to be able to receive this bracha in a state of shoresh is only something that Bnei Yisrael can be able to tap into. So what we see over here, the 𝗧his is explaining, right, in a very beautiful way, right, is that because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give us, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to channel, right, shefa to us, so therefore Hashem is judging, and Hashem is bringing this judgment dafka on Pesach. Right, the 𝗧his, he opens this up even a step further, a step deeper, explaining what's really going on, right, between this bracha of Parnassa and Pesach. It's really a deep Torah. We'll have to go through it a little bit quickly now, but we'll see. Maybe B'ezras Hashem we'll discuss it when we have Rabbi 𝗀𝗘𝗧 here, because it's touching on 𝗀𝗪𝗧 of the Bria. But just to be able to have a tam in Taf Reish Nun Aleph, the 𝗧his asked this question. He says, "Why do we need to have bracha?" What's this idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bringing bracha? Didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world in a way, in that He created a world and it should produce grain, right? It should produce produce. So the 𝗧his says, it's true, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in such a way, but then there was the chet of Adam HaRishon, in that, through that chet, the ground, right, the Adama became cursed. And part of that curse is bitzavon tachlena, that through frustration a person should eat, and thorns, and there was a blockage. There was a blockage from that shefa and the bracha being able to come out. Hushin is arv psoilis ayadeh, right, achilas, from the 𝗧𝗛𝗧, and as a result, right, of the chet of Adam HaRishon, right, there was a mixture of tov and psoilis, and that caused the blockage of bracha. So here the 𝗧his says, "Achen b'yitzias Mitzrayim," but what happened on Pesach? Nivaru b'nei Yisrael, that there was this cleansing process of b'nei Yisrael. Uv'koichem nivarer v'chol makom 𝗀𝗪𝗧 apsoilis m'seicha oichel. And because of that cleansing process, right, the kor barzel, right, that we went through when we were in Mitzrayim, we received the 𝗀𝗪𝗧, so that we, and this is really what our lives are about. What does it mean to be a Yidden? This is the Aleph Beis of Yiddishkeit, right? That we are able to, and we are sent to be able to remove the psoilis, to take away the psoilis m'teicha oichel, to peel away the klipa, to peel away the bad, right? To be able to find the good, to be able to uplift the good. V'hu halechem oini shezachu b'nei Yisrael 𝗀𝗪𝗧 halechem l'klala l'vracha ayedei inoi b'Mitzrayim. What does it mean, lechem oini? Right, so one understanding of lechem oini, the 𝗧his says over here, right, the lechem that of affliction, that we were zeicha to the lechem oini of matzah, right, because of the suffering, because of that which we went through in Mitzrayim. That the inoi of Mitzrayim, that was able to 𝗀𝗪𝗧 halechem l'klala. It was able to bring out, on some level, right, to bring out the lechem that was cursed, that curse that happened as a result of the chet. And he says, that he says that what took place in Mitzrayim, because of the inoi that we went through, the suffering that we went through, that was mekayim, the suffering of 𝗪𝗡 𝗪. And therefore, as a result of that suffering that took place in Mitzrayim, where we're able to remove a layer of this curse on the land, and therefore we're able to access bracha. And look what he says. He says, Chazal amru lechem oini she'oinin alav devarim. So how is this relevant to us? So it's relevant to us because another pshat, where Chazal were dorish, what's lechem oini? That it's a bread in which many things are said. Haremes should be sipur yitzias Mitzrayim metaktim ata koma shehayu tzrichin az letaken idea avoda kasha. That which Bnei Yisrael were metaken through being in that suffering, we are able to be metaken, and we are able to achieve that through telling the story of Mitzias Mitzrayim. Through lechem oini, the lechem that we speak over, is connected to the lechem oini, the lechem of affliction. And therefore, through Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, that we do, we're able to be metaken that which Bnei Yisrael were metaken through their suffering. And what's the result? Let's see what he says. V'yesh remez chsiv. He brings a beautiful remez, like he says, when it comes to the curse of after the chet of Adam, it says, B'tzavon tochlena kol yemei chayecha, that you're going to eat this bread, this b'tzavon tochlena, in a way of affliction, in a way of sadness. We spoke a lot about this in the Chabur. What is this? But for now, we'll just call it sadness. Okay. Kol yemei chayecha, all the days of your life. So look what the 𝗧his says. He says, V'hacha, and when it comes to Yitzias Mitzrayim, what do we say? Leman tiskar, that you should remember, 𝗀𝗚će Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha. That we should remember, same words, kol yemei chayecha. We should remember Yitzias Mitzrayim all the days of our lives. So the 𝗧his says, Sha'yedei zechiyas Yitzias Mitzrayim, yicholu nevarer 𝗪𝗃𝗧 v'diskos la'aretz etz ha'chaim. That through our 𝗧his Mitzrayim and through our Leil Seder, when we're involved in Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, we're involved in this process of getting rid of the bad, and on some level being able to connect, right, to a light of the Eitz HaChaim. Because after the klala of Adam Arishon that took place in the beginning of time, the Adamah was cursed. So what's the 𝗧his saying? The 𝗧his is saying is, he started off with a question and said, why is it that we need to have bracha? Didn't Hashem create the world in a way of bracha? So he's answering and saying, Hashem did create the world in a way that things should produce, but because of the klala, there was a blockage. And therefore we need to have the bracha to be able to uplift that, so that therefore we're able to receive the shefa and abundance that Hashem wants to give us. How does that take place? Through Pesach. Through Pesach. Because it was through Pesach and it was through us being in Mitzrayim, the Shibud in Mitzrayim, and the Yitzias Mitzrayim. I think we could understand, perhaps one understanding, when I saw the 𝗧his, we saw that the Bnei Yissaschar said that, if you remember what his lashon, he says that through the eating, the Bnei Yissaschar says that mechilas matzah nimshach parnassa, the lechem oini. He says, hine achilas matzah lechem oini skula leparnassa. The eating of the matzah is a skula for parnassa. One way of understanding this, based off what we see over here from the 𝗧his, right, is that because of the eating of the matzah, right, which is the eating of the matzah, which is a kiyum, right, a kiyum of this lechem oini, that's something which is able to channel in the parnassa, because we're able to get rid of that blockage that happened from Chet Adam Arishon. But b'chomakra, what we've seen here, and really there's a lot more to share, and as Hashem, we're going to be really rolling it out as we unpackage each topic of Pesach, is that yes, there's a tremendous connection between Parnassa and Pesach, right? Not just the fact that we have a lot of bills to pay, right? And this is something which the tzaddikim spoke about. We have a beautiful minhag brought down from Reb Chaim Pelagi, right, in 𝗧h𝗦𝗕 that he brings down that there was a minhag, right, Leil Motzi Pesach noigim l'shtach shibalim mevatzim amanichim gam shiboilis, right, beroisham, that what they used to do is that on Motzi Pesach they would take out the wheat and the stalks, right, and they would lay it out in their houses. Now, why did they do that? Mishum de Pesach nidonim ala tzvua l'siman atava sheyesh shna soiva. Because, as we quoted before, the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Pesach is a time in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, is being nidoin ala tzvua, and it's siman atova that we should have a year of abundance. And what we're trying to do as we go through Pesach is that we're trying to connect to this tremendous ore that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has embedded within the Chag of Parnassa, right? We know, even from little children, we remember, right? Why is it, right? And you can imagine, right? The first Leil HaSeder, right? The first Leil HaSeder, all the Yidden getting ready to leave Pesach, and Moshe gets up and says, Yidden, no, wait. What do you need to do, everyone? Before you go out, make sure, right? Make sure that you take all your money, right? We know 𝗪𝗪 already, right? That they were already doing the hachanas for this. You can imagine such a thing. Do you think that's what they were thinking about? Nice jewelry and money. They wanted to get out of Mitzrayim. Either they just wanted to get out of Mitzrayim for the 𝗀𝗪icious reason, for the 𝗀𝗪icious reason. What is this? That we need to go get money. But we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very makpid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very makpid, and Moshe Rabbeinu was very makpid to tell them, listen, Chevra, we have something that goes way back to Avram Avinu. We're a chush gadol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to leave Mitzrayim wealthy. So we find as well another deep connection here, right, between Pesach and money, Pesach and geld. Right, as well, it's a big topic within itself. Bezos Hashem will touch upon it throughout the series. Spoken about it previously within the Chabur. Right, that when we look at the story of Pesach, right, the story of Pesach, even before we went out of Mitzrayim, right, we know that Paro, that when he had his approach of how to be able to enslave the Yidden, right, that he did it from a very strategic way, right, taking something called avodah, work, and turning it into avdus. Right, and one of Paro's core strategies on how to be able to break a nation, how to be able to break a person, not just physically, how to be able to break them mentally, how to be able to break them emotionally, right, psychologically, was to be able to take something, right, called work, and to be able to turn it on its head. And therefore we find, once again, embedded into the theme of Pesach, an understanding of work, what work is meant to look like, when work goes wrong, when work starts to become unproductive, and a geula process from being in a bad job, right? I think it was a bad boss and it was a bad job. He ticked off all the boxes of what a bad job is, to be there in Mitzrayim, and the geula process of an understanding of what work is meant to be. So we find that from all planes, money perspective, an abundance perspective, a work perspective, we find embedded into this Chag of Pesach. And Be'ezus Hashem, what we're going to be doing, once again, not to limit Pesach just to these topics, because Pesach is 𝗀𝗪𝗓, Pesach is everything. But for each one of us to be able to go through the process of hachanas for Pesach and the mitzvahs of Pesach, so that we can understand each one of us, and to be able to bring it down into our Pesach. Just to share a couple of avodas. Right, we're going to speak about, as I mentioned, we're going to speak about these more in depth as we go through the Chabur. But just for now, since we spoke about it, we want to be able to end with something practical. Right, what we shared here today is that one experience of eating matzah is the experience of connecting to bracha in its shorish. Right, we saw from the 𝗧his. Therefore, Hashem said you can't eat chametz. And something that we can do is we sit there, right, on Leil Seder, right, with our matzah, even not just on Leil Seder. The rest. It might be easier the other nights of Leil Seder. It's hard to do kavanas if you're not doing Seder by yourself and you have other people you have to entertain. But Hashem should give us all 𝗬𝗪𝗪 to be able to do it even in Leil Seder. Right, as we sit there, because obviously that's the greatest night of Pesach. Right, that as we sit there with our matzah, right, and we eat our matzah, right, to close your eyes and to be misbaina and to be able to imagine this reality, that what I'm connecting to when I'm eating matzah is I'm connecting to bracha in a shorish. I'm connecting to Ein Sof, right, in its shorish, in a very, very deep and very profound way. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is channeling in through me, as we saw from Bnei Yisachar, through the achila of matzah, is channeling shefa and parnassa for the whole entire year. And another avodah that we can also keep in mind, based off of the other Torah we saw from the 𝗧his, right, is that when it comes to the 𝗂𝗪 Mitzrayim, right, obviously there's a very big focus on the nisim and the neflayos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did, and then the makos. Right, each family needs to find for themselves, what part of the Haggadah in the 𝗂𝗪 Mitzrayim to focus on, right, depending on who's there. But one thing we find from the 𝗧his, and something that really struck me when I was reading this, is that sometimes we can get caught up on the geula, but we find that it was important to speak also about the inui. Right, within the Haggadah, within the text of the Haggadah, right, there's an emphasis to focus on what took place, what was the inui. And what we see from the Sfas Emes here is that it wasn't just, okay, 𝗀𝗽liche of like, okay, let's speak about the suffering so then we can talk about the Geula. But we see is that through speaking about the Inui, through speaking about the 𝗀𝗏𝗏 Yetzias Mitzrayim, talking about what that avodah was that they had, we're connecting to a tikkun, we're connecting to a rectification of what took place thousands of years ago in Mitzrayim, which ultimately was blocking a klala, which comes from the beginning of time, right, from Ma'aseh Bereshis. So Ezra Hashem, we give a bracha to each one of us, right, that as we journey together, right, that each one of us will be able to find that Torah, right, find that angle that you're able to connect to, and as we go through the process of preparing for Pesach, we should do it, right, b'simcha, even we're sitting there at our desks, and we're sitting there taking care of everything we need to recognize, what I'm involved in right now, in my Parnassa, and paying my bills, and making sure, I have everything, and being involved in my work, this is deeply connected. I am doing a hachana for Pesach by being involved through this. Each one of us should have an amazing day.